The wind howled across the Arizona territory, a dry and lonesome sound that carried with it the scent of dust and dying embers. Maggie Callahan tightened the grip on her rifle, her knuckles pale beneath the glow of a fading sun, a freshly dug grave that her feet made her stomach churn, but she would not let herself break. Not here. Not now. Ethan, her boy, clung to the folds of her tattered dress, his face buried against her side. He did not cry. He had cried all his tears the night before when she had pulled him away from his father's body. Now, his silence unnerved her more than any sobs would have. The homestead, barely more than a cabin and a few outbuildings, stood lonely against the vastness of the land. The men who had taken her husband's life had not bothered to take anything else. They had not come for money or cattle. They had come for the sheer pleasure of destruction. And they would be back. She felt the weight of the Henry rifle in her hands, the stock cool against her shoulder. She had fired it before, at coyotes, at a rattler once, but never at a man. Would she have the courage when the time came? The sun dipped lower, casting long shadows through the mesquite trees. She ushered Ethan inside, bolting the door behind them. The cabin smelled of pine wood and charred coffee, familiar but foreign now that Patrick was gone. The chair where he used to sit remained pulled out from the table, as if waiting for him. She turned away from it. Night settled thick and heavy. Somewhere in the dark, a coyote yipped, answered by another. Ethan lay on the bed, his small hands clenching the patchwork quilt his grandmother had sewn. Maggie sat in the rocker by the fireplace, rifle resting across her lap. Sleep would not come for her tonight. The knock came just before dawn. A single, deliberate knock. Maggie stood without a sound, her bare feet light on the wooden floor. The rifle was in her hands before she even thought to grab it. She moved toward the door, pressing her back against the wall. Another knock. She swallowed. "Who's there?" Silence. Ethan stirred in the bed, mumbling in his sleep. Maggie licked her lips, heart hammering against her ribs. Slowly, she crept to the window and peered through a slit in the curtain. A man stood outside, half in shadow. Not one of the outlaws, she would recognize them, but not a neighbor either. Apache. His hair was long and tied back with a leather cord. His face, hard and weathered, was streaked with dirt and something darker, blood, she realized. A rifle hung across his back, but his hands were empty. One of them clutched his side, fingers pressed against a wound that leaked through his shirt. Maggie exhaled, steadying her nerves. "What do you want?" A beat passed before he spoke. His voice was deep but quiet. "Water." She hesitated. Trusting a stranger in this land was foolish. But leaving a wounded man outside, knowing he would die without help, was something worse. Ethan sat up, rubbing his eyes. "Mama." Maggie glanced at him, then back at the door. Her father had raised her to be tough, but he had also taught her to be decent. She made her decision. The bolt slid free with a soft click. She cracked the door open, rifle still held firm. The man did not move. He only watched her, dark eyes unreadable. She stepped back. "You can have water. Nothing more." The Apache scout, because that's what he was, she realized, nodded once and stepped inside. He moved slow, deliberate, as though aware of how close she was to pulling the trigger. Maggie kept to the other side of the room, filling a tin cup from the water bucket. He took it from her with a nod, drinking deep. His hands were steady, though she saw the pain behind his eyes. "Name's Chayton," he said after a moment. She said nothing. He set the empty cup down. "I won't stay long." "That's good," she answered. Chayton's gaze flickered to Ethan, then back to her. "You're alone." It wasn't a question. Maggie's fingers twitched against the rifle stock. "Not alone." A faint smirk touched his lips. "No." He winced, pressing a hand to his ribs. "But not safe either." She stiffened. "What do you know about it?" He lifted his gaze. "I know the men who did this." The air in the room changed, thickening like a storm rolling in. Maggie's breath came sharp. "You know them?" His eyes did not waver. "They killed a family 2 nights ago. Burned their home. Took what they wanted." He exhaled slowly. "They'll come back." A coldness settled in her bones. She had known this, deep down. The outlaws weren't done, and she had a child to protect. Chayton watched her, reading the fear she tried to mask. "You won't survive alone." Maggie lifted her chin. "I don't have a choice." A long silence stretched between them. Then, to her surprise, he spoke again. "I'll stay until you do." She narrowed her eyes. "Why?" His expression was unreadable, but there was something old and tired in his gaze. "Because I know what it is to lose everything." The words cut deeper than she expected. For the first time, she looked at him not as an Apache, not as a stranger, but as a man who had also lost someone. Someone who, like her, was wandering the ruins of what once was. A gust of wind rattled the shutters, and outside, the land stretched wide and unyielding. Maggie looked away first. "There's a cot by the fire." Chayton inclined his head. "I'll keep watch." She let out a slow breath. For now, that was enough. Morning came with the sound of hoofbeats in the distance. Maggie was on her feet before she knew it, heart thudding. She reached for the rifle. Chayton was already by the window, his hand on his own weapon. "They're coming," he murmured. A figure on horseback appeared at the ridge. Then another. Then 3 more. Maggie's grip tightened. Chayton glanced at her, then at Ethan, who clung to her skirts. His jaw set. "Stay low. No sudden movements." She nodded, breath shallow. The riders came closer, dust curling behind them. One of them, tall, broad, with a scar down his cheek, pulled his horse to a stop. Well, he drawled. "Miss Callahan, you're looking a little worse for wear." Maggie swallowed bile. She knew that voice. Tom Braddock, a rancher turned thief, and the man who had been smiling when her husband bled out in the dirt. Braddock leaned forward on his saddle. "We came to check in on you. Thought you might need some company." Maggie's hand shook. Chayton stepped closer, his presence steady beside her. Braddock's eyes flicked to the Apache. His smirk widened. "Now, ain't this a surprise?" The other men chuckled, a low, hungry sound. Chayton's voice was quiet. "You should leave." Braddock grinned. "Oh, we will, but not without a little something first." His hand rested on his revolver. "You know how this works, Maggie. Give us what we want, and maybe we'll be on our way." Maggie's stomach twisted. She knew exactly what he wanted. Her fingers curled around the rifle stock. Chayton shifted, his voice low. "If you fire, make it count." She met his gaze. A silent understanding passed between them. Braddock chuckled. "Ain't no need for trouble now, darlin'." Maggie lifted the rifle. "I ain't your darlin'." The moment hung like a drawn breath. Then Braddock's hand moved. Maggie fired. The gunshot shattered the dawn's fragile stillness. Maggie felt the rifle kick hard against her shoulder, but she had no time to process the pain. Tom Braddock jerked in the saddle, his hat tumbling from his head as his body recoiled. For one breathless moment, she thought she'd killed him. But no, the bullet had only grazed his arm, leaving a dark stain spreading across his shirt. Braddock's surprise lasted no more than a heartbeat before it turned into something far uglier. His face twisted with fury, and his hand yanked the revolver from his holster. "God damn you, woman!" The crack of gunfire filled the air. Maggie threw herself to the ground as the bullet splintered the wooden beam beside her. Ethan screamed. Chayton moved fast, too fast for Braddock's men to react. His rifle barked, and the man closest to him toppled from his horse, a gurgling cry escaping his throat. A second shot rang out, sending another outlaw's hat flying. The remaining men scrambled, their horses rearing in the dust. Braddock yanked his wounded arm close to his body, his expression one of pure venom. "Fall back," he snarled. His men hesitated, but another shot from Chayton sent them wheeling their mounts around, galloping toward the ridge. Braddock lingered a moment longer, seething. "This ain't over, Maggie," he spat. "You just signed your death warrant." He yanked the reins and rode off in a storm of dust. Silence settled over the homestead, heavy and unnatural after the chaos. Maggie forced herself upright, chest heaving. She clutched the rifle, her fingers aching from how tightly she had held it. Chayton reloaded his rifle with the smooth efficiency of a man who had done it countless times before. He watched the retreating riders, his jaw tight. "They'll come back," he murmured. Maggie's throat was dry. "I know." She turned to Ethan. The boy's face was pale, his wide eyes brimming with unshed tears. Maggie dropped to her knees, and pulled him close. "It's all right, baby," she whispered. "It's over." But it wasn't. Not by a long shot. By midday, she and Chayton had fortified the homestead as best they could. They stacked barrels near the windows, secured the doors, and laid out every weapon she owned. A pitiful collection compared to what Braddock's gang surely carried. Ethan sat at the table, silent. Too silent. Maggie's heart clenched as she knelt beside him. "Talk to me, sweetheart," she urged. His small hands twisted in his lap. "Are they going to kill us?" Maggie's breath hitched. "No." She cupped his face, making him look at her. "I won't let them." Ethan searched her eyes. He was only 6, but he had already seen too much. Chayton stood near the door, his gaze distant. Finally, he spoke. "If we stay here, we die." Maggie stiffened. "This is my home. It won't be if they burn it to the ground." She hated the truth in his words. She glanced out the window to the vast emptiness stretching beyond the land she and Patrick had carved from the wild. She had nowhere else to go. Chayton watched her. "I know a place. Safe. But we need to leave before nightfall." Maggie hesitated. Trusting a stranger was dangerous. But was it more dangerous than waiting for Braddock to return? She glanced at Ethan. The answer was clear. They packed only what they could carry: food, water, ammunition. Maggie tucked Patrick's revolver in her belt, the weight foreign but comforting. As the sun bled into the horizon, Chayton led them away from the homestead. Maggie didn't look back. The journey was grueling. They rode through the night, keeping off the main trails, their pace slow but steady. Chayton moved with the surety of a man who knew the land better than his own reflection. Maggie kept Ethan close, his small body slumped against her as he dozed. By dawn, they reached the foothills of the distant mountains. The terrain grew rougher, forcing them to dismount and lead the horses on foot. Maggie's muscles screamed, but she gritted her teeth and pressed on. Chayton stopped suddenly, lifting a hand. Maggie froze. The air was different here. Charged. Then she saw it. Hidden among the rocks, a small cluster of makeshift dwellings. Smoke curled from a fire pit, and figures moved in the early light. Maggie's pulse quickened. "Who are they?" Chayton exhaled. "People who have lost as much as you." They descended carefully. As they approached, heads turned, eyes wary. A tall man stepped forward, his face lined with age, but his posture unyielding. Chayton spoke to him in his own tongue. The man listened, then shifted his gaze to Maggie. She swallowed hard, gripping Ethan's hand. After a long silence, the man nodded. Chayton turned to her. "We can rest here." Relief threatened to buckle her knees. The settlement was simple but sturdy. Maggie felt the weight of curious gazes as they were led to a small shelter. Inside, it was cooler, shaded from the relentless sun. She sank onto the ground, pulling Ethan close. His eyelids drooped. Chayton stood near the entrance, arms crossed. Met his gaze. "Why are you helping us?" For a moment, he said nothing. Maggie didn't. "Because once someone helped me." She waited, but he did not elaborate. Instead, he glanced toward the distant horizon. "Rest. It won't be long before Braddock starts hunting." The exhaustion finally took hold. As Maggie closed her eyes, one thought remained. The fight wasn't over. It had only just begun. The wind howled through the canyon, carrying with it the scent of dry earth and distant storm clouds. Maggie pulled Ethan closer, feeling the rapid beat of his heart against her side. Chayton crouched ahead of them, his sharp gaze fixed on a ridge above. They had been running for 2 days. Braddock had wasted no time. His men had scoured the land like a pack of wolves, cutting off the easy trails, forcing them deeper into the wild. Maggie's body ached, her mind teetering between exhaustion and sheer willpower. But she would not break. Not now. Chayton raised a hand, signaling stillness. Maggie froze, straining to hear. Then hooves, distant but closing in. Her pulse pounded as she turned to Ethan, pressing a finger to her lips. He nodded, eyes wide but brave. Chayton motioned toward the rocks, leading them into a narrow crevice barely wide enough to squeeze through. They moved quickly, the stone walls scraping their arms as they pushed deeper into the hidden passage. The space opened up just enough to crouch. Maggie clutched Ethan, willing him to stay silent. Braddock's men thundered into view. She recognized the bastard's voice instantly. "Fan out. That redskin knows these lands, but he ain't a ghost." Maggie clenched her jaw. The men spread out, their rifles at the ready. One of them, a wiry man with a scar down his cheek, dismounted, scanning the ground. "We're close," he muttered. Chayton's hand brushed his knife. A silent promise. For a moment, Maggie thought they might go unnoticed. But then, Ethan shifted, his foot dislodging a small stone. It tumbled down the slope, bouncing loudly. Scarface's head snapped up. "Wait!" His eyes narrowed, tracking the sound. Maggie's stomach knotted. Scarface took a step closer. Then another. His fingers twitched on the trigger. Maggie's breath hitched. Not like this. A bird shrieked overhead. In the same instant, Chayton struck. He moved like lightning, a blur of motion. His knife sank deep into Scarface's ribs before the man could utter a sound. Maggie lunged forward, snatching the man's rifle as he slumped. The others turned at the noise. There! Gunfire erupted. Chayton dragged Maggie and Ethan down as bullets chipped the rocks. The narrow space worked to their advantage. The outlaws couldn't maneuver easily. Maggie raised a rifle. She wasn't a sharpshooter, but desperation sharpened her aim. She fired. One man staggered back, clutching his shoulder. Chayton's revolver cracked. Another went down. But Braddock didn't flinch. He leveled his gun at her, eyes burning with hatred. "Into the line, Maggie." A gunshot rang out. Braddock jerked back, a dark stain spreading over his chest. For a moment, he just stood there as if his body refused to believe it. Then his knees buckled, and he collapsed, dust rising around him. Maggie's breath came in sharp gasps. She turned. Ethan stood there, holding Patrick's revolver. His small hands trembled. His face was pale. Maggie ran to him, dropping to her knees. "Baby!" His lower lip quivered. "I had to." Tears burned her eyes. She pulled him close. "I know." Chayton watched Braddock's lifeless body. Then he turned to Maggie. "It's over." She exhaled, shaking. The storm finally broke. Rain began to fall, washing away the blood and dust. Maggie looked up, her arms wrapped tightly around her son. The frontier had taken everything from her. But in this moment, as the rain cleansed the land, she knew one thing.